Have you ever had a test that you just took one good look at? You wanted to crumple that test up, rip it to pieces, crumple it into a nice big ball and just shove it down your teacher's throat. I'm sure you have. Every sane, normal person has. Hello, I'm Saleh Ameer, and today we're going to talk about some test types and purposes. In my previous video, I mentioned that when we assess or when we test, what we're broadly doing is we're gathering information, making a decision or decisions, and these decisions have consequences. Now, there are many ways which we can view tests in terms of the types of information we wish to gather, the decisions we wish to make, and the consequences of the test. Now, the first way you could look at a test really is, or the first classification is direct versus indirect. Now, you may, if you were paying attention, you may say something like, whoa, wait a minute, didn't you just say in the previous video that every test is indirect? Yes, when we test, we are indirectly measuring a construct, a language ability, because we can't observe it. You know, language is somewhere in the brain, and if somebody comprehends or has an ability, it can't be measured with a ruler or a scale or anything like that. So we need indirect methods like tests and assessments. But what we're talking about here, direct is just the nature of the test. A direct test is when test takers use the ability we wish to measure. So for example, speaking and writing. If we have a speaking or writing test and the test takers actually speak or actually write, this is called a direct test of speaking or writing. Indirect, on the other hand, is when, test takers speaking or writing is assessed through, related tasks like, measuring their punctuation, the grammar skills, their organization, pronunciation, vocabulary, and things like that. And, these are put together and we assume that this is their ability in writing or speaking without actually testing, without getting them to actually, speak or write. Direct tests are sometimes called, performance-based assessment, performance-based tests. And there are two ways, or McNamara in his book, Measuring Second Language Performance, distinguishes between, two types, a strong sense of, of performance-based and a weak sense. Now, a strong sense focuses on task completion. A weak sense focuses on language use. Well, what is the difference? Well, teachers mainly want to focus on language use, which is the weak sense. Let me give you this example to help clarify. Suppose I want to test somebody's ability at giving directions. I could ask them, how do I get from A, B? Now, one student may just, point to my mobile phone. They'll take the mobile phone, they'll type in Google Map, and they'll show me, like, without even saying a word, like, okay, just follow, the directions of the map. Now, this person here has essentially completed the task very well, because if the focus was on actual task completion and I wanted to get from A to B, then this student or this test taker, very efficiently got me from A to B. But they didn't use any language. I didn't gather enough information about their language ability, and I can't, as a result, make any decisions about, how capable or how able they are, in terms of speaking or in terms of giving directions. So as teachers, you want to focus on, the weak sense of performance-based assessment. You want to focus more on language use and not so much on task completion. We could also look at tests in terms of objective versus subjective. Now, similar to direct and indirect, every test is subjective. Every test, and it is our duty to, reduce the influence of subjectivity as much as we can. But we're talking about, objective and subjective in terms of scoring. Sometimes some tests are scored objectively. So a correct answer is a correct answer regardless of who scores the item. If I have a question like, 2 times 2, the answer's 4. It doesn't matter if I score it or if a colleague scores it or a teacher in, South Africa scores it. Whoever scores the test, they're going to tick correct because the answer's correct. There's no way 2 teachers are going to say, no, this is correct, and another teacher says, oh, no, it's half right, half wrong, and the third teacher is going to say, no, it's completely wrong, because there's only one answer. So, tests like, multiple choice, true, false, matching, fill in the space, these are, objectively scored. On the other hand, we've got some tests which are subjectively scored by humans who may award different scores to the same answer. In a test of writing or speaking, if a student wrote an essay, well, teachers may give that same essay different scores. Or they may rate a spoken sample, as how students speaking, they may rate it differently. That's just the nature of, performance-based tests that we covered previously. So you may ask, well, how is an objective test subjective in nature? Well, because, an objective, even though it's scored objectively, at the end of the day, a human decides, what topic to introduce, what tasks and what items. So that is an element of subjectivity. Another teacher may have chosen another topic and another task and different items. So there is an element of subjectivity in both, and we just want to reduce the influence of that subjectivity as much as we can. And in performance-based assessments like speaking and writing, you want to make sure that there's a rating scale, a very clear rating scale with descriptors that mention, like, look, a score of 6 means, this, with clear descriptors. A score of 5 means this, and, there has to be a clear distinction between 6 and 5, 5 and 4, 4 and 3, all the way to 0, okay? You also want to train the raters to use that rating scale. And then you want to use many facets rash measurement or multifacets rash measurement to reduce the subjectivity or the influence raters had, their severity degrees, and the influence that had on the scores. A third way, or a fourth, I've lost count, of looking at tests is formal and informal. A formal test is just your traditional tests, the test, paper and pencil test where you have questions, answers, and then you're going to get a grade at the end. Informal is basically what I call teachers being teachers. It's the things that happen, the interactions between teachers and students in the classroom. They're informal. A teacher may explain a point and then ask some questions. And he or she's basically assessing here. And based on the answers, the teacher will make a decision whether to move to the next point or to explain the previous point once again. Now, the purpose of the informal assessment, it's not judgmental, it's non-judgmental, there are no serious decisions, not really any grades to be given per se, and it serves basically, to provide feedback to the teacher and encouragement to the students. There's no, grades assigned to it. It's not very formal or systematic or planned as the formal type of assessment is. We can also look at tests in terms of formative versus summative. Formative assessment is assessment that occurs throughout the course while students are learning. It provides information to the teacher how well their students are doing and to monitor, their progress and whether they're meeting course objectives or not. Most informal assessment is naturally formative, but we've just discussed. Summative, on the other hand, it measures or summarizes what students have learned at the end of a course or at the end of a unit to see how well, the students have met the course teaching objectives. And again, it's the summative really is your typical midterm final test that you do at school. A summative test usually results in an actual grade, like an A+ or an A or a 90 out of 100, whatever. There's an actual grade at the end. But formative it's not so much. Just remember to distinguish between them. When we say formative, the word form, it's forming or shaping what you are teaching and what the students are learning. Now, you do this throughout the course. You form or shape based on the assessment or the test. Summative, it sums up, summary. It's a summary of how well, test takers did on the test at the end of the course. Now, it's worth pointing out that a test could be both formative and summative. Say you give a quiz to the students after teaching them some point in the curriculum, and that quiz could be formative in that you're going to look at the results of the quiz and decide what to teach them next. And it can also be summative in that you could assign a grade based on the score of the test. You could also look at tests in terms of discrete point versus integrative. What is discrete point? Well, discrete point, it uses isolated, separate or divided, unrelated tasks to assess different parts or units of language ability one at a time. So it will test your reading, your ability to skim, and then your ability to scan, your ability to listen for specific detail, your vocabulary, your grammar. It will assess them all one at a time. Now, this has advantages. One of the major advantages is related to construct relevance that we discussed in the previous video. A wrong answer on a discrete point type of test is more meaningful, because if the test is written well and has some evidence for its validity, then we presume that the wrong answer is due to a lack in ability. Students, they won't be penalized, for lacking an ability that's unrelated to the one ability that you're measuring here. It has another advantage in that you can cover a large variety of constructs or language abilities that you wish to measure, in one go. The disadvantages, however, is it doesn't really provide a clear or complete picture of test takers' language ability, in that it's not authentic. It does not reflect how we use language naturally. When we speak naturally, or when we use language day to day, say you're at university, then what you're doing is you are listening to a lecturer, you're taking notes, so listening and then writing, and then you are asking questions, so they're speaking there, and then you maybe go home and write an assignment. So the assignment that you wrote, it integrated really lots of other skills. So it integrated your ability to listen, your ability to take notes, your ability to ask questions, and then you wrote a assignment, so it's your ability to write there. So it basically integrative requires test takers to integrate two or more language abilities. So read and then write, listen, take notes, then speak, listen, take notes, speak, and then write again. Now again, this negates the disadvantages of discrete point testing in that it's authentic. This is how we use language in our daily lives. This is how we really use language. And it provides a much more complete picture of what test takers can do with language. However, there are some disadvantages to integrative testing, in that it's more difficult to score, it's more difficult to interpret the scores. Again, a wrong answer, what does a wrong answer mean? Is it a lack in the ability to listen or speak? If it's listen and speak, or if it's read and then write. Is the wrong answer or a lower grade a result of a lack of reading ability or writing ability? It's not very clear. It's time consuming, and it can only assess a limited sample of language, because the tasks are naturally much longer. So you can only incorporate very few tasks in the assessment. So your best bet really is to somehow, as a teacher, try to use both. Try to, throughout the year, rate your students or test them with a discrete point system, and then also look at how they are able to use language, the way we use language in our daily lives. So we use an integrative method. So you want to mix, the best of both worlds here, really. The next point is really the most important distinction, in my opinion, that you as a teacher or future teacher need to recognize, is the difference between norm-referenced tests and criterion-referenced tests. A norm-referenced test, I'll read the definition from Nathan Carr's book, Designing and Analyzing Language Tests. It's a very good book. I highly recommend you read the book. So, okay, on page 323, he defines norm-reference tests as a test on which an examinee's results are interpreted by comparing them to how well others did on the test. Norm-reference test scores are often reported in terms of test takers' percentile scores, not percentage correct. So a norm-reference test, it does not tell us how well a test taker performed in absolute terms. It's telling us how well a test taker performed compared to other students. So for example, if I say, you as my student, you got the second highest grade in the class. What does the second highest grade mean? Was the highest grade 100 out of 100 and you got 99 out of 100? Or was the highest grade 21 out of 100 and you got, 20 out of 100? You don't know. It's just, that you got the second highest mark. But other than that, it's just comparing you to how well the other students performed. It's not telling you how much you learned, how much you know of the course content and material that is being covered in throughout the course. It's just telling you, it's comparing you to other students. We just know how much better or worse you did on that test compared to the other test takers. It could give you a percentile score. For example, it will say that you are at 76%. That just means that you did better than 76% of the students and that you did worse than 24% of the students. But again, in terms of what you've learned, what course content you have mastered, it's not telling you much about that. Criterion reference test, on the other hand, let me just read the definition again. Again from the same book, page 316, here we go. A criterion reference test is a test on which results are interpreted in terms of how much a learner knows in absolute terms, that is, in relation to one or more standards, objectives, or other criteria, and not with respect to how much other learners know. Criterion reference test scores are generally reported in terms of the percentage correct, not the percentile. So this is really the opposite. On the criterion reference test, what you're measuring is, okay, this is what they've learned, A, B, C, D. And this is what the student has mastered from A, B, C, D. It doesn't care what other test takers, how well other test takers did. It focuses mainly on what you did, compared to an external absolute criteria, which is, in most cases, the curriculum or the syllable or the course content. Now, there are some similarities between them. In James Dean Brown with Tom Hudson in their book Criterion Referenced Language Testing. Again, another book I highly recommend you read. On page, where is it? Yes, 11. They mention 6 similarities between them that I'll just read. Both require specification of the achievement domain to be measured. So in a norm reference test, you have to specify the group that you're comparing the test takers to. On a criterion reference test, you have to specify the criteria to which you're comparing the students to. Number 2, there are 6 similarities. Number 2, both require a relevant and representative sample of test items. Relate this to what I said in my previous video about construct underrepresentation. You want a representative sample, you want to make sure that you can make meaningful decisions based on the test. So you want to make sure that there is a relevant number of item samples to make these decisions on both tests. Number 3, both use the same types of test items. So if you just look at a test, on its own, you won't know if this is a norm reference or a criterion reference, because they both use, they can both use multiple choice questions, they can both use fill in the space, they can both use write an essay. Just looking at the test on its own, you might not know the difference between them. So they use the same types of items. Number 4, both use the same rules for item writing. So you want to follow which is something we'll cover in another lecture, maybe the next one. The criteria or the standards of writing good quality items apply to both norm referenced and criterion referenced. Both are judged by the same qualities of goodness, that is validity. So both tests need to provide evidence to support, whatever claims they are making, whatever inferences and interpretations they are making about test takers. And finally, number 6, both are useful in educational measurement. Now, the differences between them, however, I have a nice table here. If I'm very good at editing, I'll somehow edit this table and put it in, the video. Otherwise, I will just show you here, and maybe you can just capture the screen and get this. I'll hold this for 3, 2, 1. This table really summarizes. Oh, sorry, I showed you the wrong table. Sorry, forget that one. This one here. That one's for a later point. Okay, again, I'll hold it for 3, 2, 1. There are basically 6 differences between them. I'll just go through all 6 of them. So with norm reference test, the first difference is in the type of interpretation we make. So in norm reference, the type of interpretation is relative. So a student's performance is compared to other students' performance. And a criterion reference, it's absolute. So a student's performance is compared only to the amount or percentage of the material that they've learned. The type of measurement on a norm reference test is to measure general language abilities or proficiencies. On a criterion reference is to measure specific objectives-based language points. So it's measuring what has been taught throughout the course and not general, abilities. The purpose of testing, a norm reference purpose, is to spread students out along a continuum of general abilities or proficiencies. This is something we'll discuss a lot more when we do some statistics, but we have this thing called a normal distribution. The purpose of a norm reference test is to have a test where you've got, very low abilities, average, above average, high abilities, extremely high abilities. You want them spread out like that, where, the very high abilities, there's very few, and very low abilities, there's fewer. Then most of them are in the middle there of the average. On a criterion reference test, however, it's the purpose of testing is to assess the amount of material known or learned by each student. In an ideal world, what you want on a criterion reference test is a lot of students to get a full mark and very few to get low marks. You don't want that distribution. One of the biggest mistakes I see teachers make when testing is they design a test, a criterion reference test, with a norm reference mentality. So they'd say something like, oh, okay, I'm going to put some easy questions for the lower ability students to get right, and I'm going to put some difficult questions to challenge the higher ability students. No. That is not your job. That is not your job here. Your job is to assess and test what you've been teaching and what they've been learning. That's all. You don't want special questions for students. You want a test where theoretically all the students can get an A and a full mark. You want a test that covers only the material that you've been learning, and the only criteria to which somebody will pass, fail, or get a full mark or not is whether they've learned that material. You don't want to go out of your way to design a test that spreads students out in that way. Another difference is in the distribution of scores, which is something we'll cover more in statistics, so we'll skip past that. The test structure of a norm-referenced test, there's a few relatively long subtests with a variety of items, so you have a larger variety. But in criterion-referenced, it's a series of short, well-defined subtests with similar item content. Similar in that it's related to the actual curriculum that you've been teaching. The final difference is the knowledge of questions. So on a norm-referenced test, students have little or no idea of what content to expect in test items. But in criterion-referenced tests, students know exactly what content to expect in the test items. Now that doesn't mean they know the type of content. They know that it's related to the curriculum. They know the type of questions, because you as a teacher should practice whatever items and tasks you're going to give them in the test. You should have practiced those tasks and items with them throughout the course. So they know the type of tasks and items that they're going to get in the exam. Finally, we'll look at 4 types of tests that are, again, important to distinguish between them. Achievement tests, proficiency tests, placement tests, and diagnostic tests. Achievement tests, if we go back to Nathan Carr, page 300 and 300 and, where are we? Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the, so 313. Achievement test is a test used to identify how well students have met course objectives or mastered course content. So it's limited to material that has been covered throughout the course. It takes place usually at the end of the course, so it's summative by nature. It uses tasks that were used in class, again, so it's criterion. It determines whether course objectives have been met. The purpose of the test and whether students have learned what you want them to learn. Now, it could contribute to formative feedback or have a diagnostic role, which is something we'll cover in the next slide. But, generally speaking, it's summative in nature. The next test, type of test, is a placement test. I'll read the definition again from Carr's glossary. So a placement test, where is it gone? Here it is a test used to decide at which level in a language program a student should study. So its purpose is to place students into specific levels or classes. This level should be not too difficult or too easy. It should be just challenging enough for them to learn, without it being too easy where they won't learn anything new, or too difficult where they can't learn anything new. Now, it should also provide some diagnostic information for the teachers teaching that class. So the teachers will look at the placement test and say, right, this is what my students in this class need work on based on the test results. Some achievement tests or proficiency tests can be used as placement tests. You'd find some institutes will do that. Placement tests are usually formative in that they help shape or form the teaching and learning of the class. The third type of test is a diagnostic test. Again, I'll read the definition from the glossary here. Test used to identify learners' areas of strength and weakness. So its purpose is, from the name diagnostic, is to diagnose aspects and areas that a student may need to further develop. It usually occurs at the beginning or middle of the course. So at the beginning of the course, you'd give a diagnostic test, you'd analyze what areas your students need to develop more, and what are the things they're good at, and what are the things that they are not so good at, and that will shape what you teach throughout the course. Now, a diagnostic test should offer the most amount of detail and information about test takers' ability, because it's going to shape what you're going to teach them. Last but not least, the proficiency tests. Same book I'm reading from the glossary. So a proficiency test assesses an examinee's level of language ability, but without respect to a particular curriculum. Typically, this involves assessing more than one narrow aspect of language ability. So these tests, or proficiency tests, test general competence, overall ability. They're usually summative and norm-referenced, and they provide a single score with lots of sub-scores. Like the IELTS, it will give you a general score out of 9, and then it will tell you a separate score for each skill or each of the 4 skills: reading, speaking, listening, and writing, separately. Now, these type of tests usually have a gatekeeping, what they call a gatekeeping role. So, say you want to apply to study at a university in an English-speaking country like the US, the UK, Canada, Australia. You may have to take a proficiency test to see whether you are at an ability that is high enough to cope with the language demands of the university that you wish to study. So your entrance, being accepted or denied entrance into the university could be based on your score. Now, Brown and Abiwikrama, in their book Language Assessment, again a very valuable book, I highly recommend you read this. On page 11, they state that because they, proficiency test, measure performance against the norm with equated scores and percentile ranks taking on paramount importance, they are usually not equipped to provide diagnostic feedback. However, I don't know if I fully agree with this. I think good proficiency tests like, the TOEFL or the IELTS, they do provide, a certain degree of detail or description of what test takers can do at each level. And hence, it does have a sort of, I believe, some sort of diagnostic, some valuable diagnostic feedback that, you could use. Finally, we have a summary table here that I want to show you from James Dean's Brown Testing in Language Programs. Again, every book I've showed you in this video is highly recommended. And this is the table I accidentally showed you. I'll just hopefully put it there where you can see the table in full. Basically, this is a summary table. It splits the tests into, according to the types of decisions, into norm-referenced and criterion-referenced. Under norm-referenced, you have, proficiency tests and placement tests. Under criterion-referenced, you have achievement and diagnostic tests. And then it tells you, it looks at, the detail of information each test provides, the focus, the purpose of decisions, the relationship to the program, when it's administered, and the interpretation of scores. If you're one of my students in the language testing module, you'll get all the tables that I've showed here in your notes. I recommend that you go through those tables and it provides a good summary of everything we've discussed. Okay, so everyone was complaining that the sound quality of my videos was a bit poor. I'm using some earphones with a microphone, so hopefully that helps a bit, towards, or contributes a bit towards better sound quality. Lighting, I can't, change the lighting in the office here. So I hope you found this video useful and or entertaining. If not, I hope the beast with 5 fingers reaches out the screen and slashes you. Thank you very much.